you're anything like me, when you go outdoor climbing, you occasionally think to yourself, I wonder what this area was like before it was all developed. You'll look at a route and think, I wonder what it took to bolt that. You'll look at the approach trail and think, how did making the approach to this even work? I didn't know how any of this stuff worked. I had a lot of questions.
What does it cost to bolt a route? What all goes into making an approach to a crag? How does compiling and printing a guidebook work? Who's doing all this stuff? Is it hard to learn? And how much time does it take? I wanted to learn more about how it all worked. So like any 20-year-old something, I turned to the internet with a simple request. Who knows stuff about developing? I'd love to chat. And wow, was I overwhelmed at their response.
After lengthy conversations with over a dozen different developers, here's some of the most interesting things that I learned. First, let's talk about route development. How much do you think that it costs to bolt a standard sport climbing route? Let's just assume there's 10 bolts and a standard anchor setup. Pause the video and put your guesses in the comments. Okay, now let's make a shopping list for what we would need to bolt this route and the estimated costs associated with each item.
Just getting set up is anywhere from $700 to $1,500 before the first bolt even goes into the wall. The bulk of that cost being a hammer drill, generally running around $400 to $600. The rock dictates how much power the drill needs to have. Red River Gorge sandstone is easier on bits and a drill than granite or limestone. Drill bits will generally cost around $10 to $15 and last for a couple of routes. You'll also need standard climbing equipment, including a harness, shoes, rope, and helmet. As far as hardware is concerned, the general consensus is that you can estimate about $10 a bolt. For the anchor system, the cost ranges from about $12 to $25. The cost for the anchor ranges a lot because anchors can really be different from place to place. Are there chains? And if so, what type of chain are you using? How long are the chains? Does the route have mussy hooks? You'll also need epoxy to glue in the bolts, which is about $17 to $20 per tube. One tube of glue will usually get you between 10 to 12 holes. You'll also need 2 caulk gun tips. If you work fast, maybe you'll only need about 2 per route, which is $4.
As you can see, all the supplies start to add up quickly. For our 10 bolt route example, that type of route would cost anywhere from $150 to $200 on average. That doesn't include the startup costs that we talked about earlier. To put that in context, at the Red River Gorge, there are over 2,000 sport routes. Now, they do vary in length, but it's still really easy to see how the cost of routes adds up very, very quickly. And that's just for the hardware to bolt them. That doesn't include things like purchasing land, maintaining signage, benches, making retaining walls, and maintaining the approach to the crags. These types of things vary greatly in cost, but are needed to maintain it and keep it sustainable for future use. Here's one example of a recent retaining wall project at the Mad River Gorge, a small crag located in southern Ohio.
Here's what Courtney had to say. We've always used railroad ties as it is a durable material that will hold up to the weather. It's getting use out of recycled material, and in general, they're more affordable than having to buy lots of treated lumber. We can usually find railroad ties for $17 to $20 a piece. We also use rebar, which is typically about $6 per stick, and you can get multiple nails made from cut rebar out of each rod. We've also been incredibly lucky at the Mad River Gorge, as the Clark County Park District has allowed us to use the extra gravel they have available as a backfill material to complete our retaining wall and belay areas. This saves us a lot of money on the project. Equipment rental can also be pricey, as sometimes you'll need a small bobcat or tractor to move supplies.
Developing and maintaining crags isn't just expensive, it also takes a lot of time and effort. During the conversations that I had with all the developers, I think pretty much every single one of them talked about how much work all this takes. I was curious, what does the actual bolting process look like? Here's what Lauren, a developer who has bolted over 15 routes, had to say, and it made me laugh, but it also sounds like quite a bit of work.
The actual bolting a route can be thought about like this. At least the red. Go for a hike with an 80-pound pack. Then go for a scramble, harness on with your rope. Then bushwhack through thick underbrush, so thick you can't see at times and half the plants want to stab you. Then have a rappel with a hammer and a selection of brushes, hoping that you're in the right spot. Use the hammer and brushes to clean for a while. Your legs will probably go numb from hanging in the harness. Then descend, drink and eat and wait for sensation in your legs to come back. Then clip on the drill, extra bit, pipe cleaners, and tubing and start drilling. Your legs will go numb again, but this time you have to keep going. When you get to the top, hopefully you've drilled and cleaned all the bolt holes and remembered to clip your bolting bag to the rope so you can haul it. Now the speed comes into play. You want to get as many bolts safely and correctly fitted into the wall before the epoxy hardens in the tip and the tip is now trash. Starting from the top, the anchors go in first, then each subsequent glue and bolt comes from top down. The next day, the chains and drop-ins can be installed on top, then the ropes pulled and bushwhacking is reversed. If a developer is lucky and doesn't forget anything, they'll have to ascend the rope to the top of the cliff just twice.
Developer John also had a good point when he talked about quality versus quantity of creating routes and what the process looks like for that.
Finding routes is really time-consuming. A good estimate would be if you explored 10 different cliff lines, you might find one climbing area. Don't misunderstand me, most cliff bands could be climbed, one way or another, but what I look for is clean solid stone with some length. I don't subscribe to the method of one guy wrapping in and bolting from the top down without actually climbing the route on top rope. I prefer setting up a top rope, doing the line, and pretending to clip the bolts. Then get other climbers to climb it and discuss the bolt placement. I believe this method produces a more user-friendly route, but it's definitely more time-consuming.
This is only the time that it takes to bolt the actual routes. This isn't factoring in any of the work that it takes to create a safe and sustainable approach. Here's what one developer had to say about creating trails that can work for years to come.
Start off with like a trail walk down, pre-job walk down. Yeah, like you say, you gotta work out how much mileage you have on the trail. Count how many trees, sort of make a map making of a problem areas. Sometimes you'll find a lot of trees on the trail, that's great. There are climbing areas with no trees at all. You gotta hike in, these freaking huge big wooden pallets. And it all depends on the surrounding community, how many people are already stoked and psyched on putting their effort in to maintain the trails.
There's a lot of opportunities when it comes to trail work, and one that I plan to take advantage of is the New River Gorge's No Work Week. It's an entire week dedicated to maintaining and improving on projects in the New River Gorge with trail work, retaining walls, and anything in between. The group's typical schedule is 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. for 7 days in a row, with time to relax and hang out with other climbers in the evening. So now that we know some basic costs associated with creating approaches and routes, let's talk about the time that it takes to document and share this knowledge with climbers so that they can actually go climb in these places. I reached out to Sabrina, who is the author of the Long Island Bouldering Guide, to see what she had to say about the process of creating the guide.
So previously, before the guide, there were very few and far between people who had any information about Long Island bouldering. What was out there was inaccurate or not super detailed. And as the guide came out digitally and people were able to access it, all of this information that they never knew was there, it really created a large community around Long Island bouldering.
A big part of the reason we wanted to create the Long Island Bouldering Guide was so we could preserve the history. I had started bouldering, 13 years ago with a lot of the guys who had FA'd these lines, and they had brought me out on my first outdoor climbing trips, and then they all slowly started to move away until there was nobody left. I realized that I had an opportunity to gather all the information before it was lost forever and put it into a comprehensive guide for future generations of Long Island climbing to enjoy.
The next time you go climbing, I hope this information helps you to appreciate how much time, money, and energy goes into helping you get your 6 cents, bro. I've left some links in the description for organizations that you can donate to help support these efforts, as well as some opportunities to donate your time. I want to emphasize just how much this video was made possible by the list of names in the description. Thank you for taking the time to not only educate me and in turn educate other climbers, but also for all the time, energy, and money that you've put into creating crags that we know and love. As climbers, I truly believe that it's our responsibility to donate our time and money where we can to help maintain the places that we climb. As always, thank you so much for watching, and stay hyped.